You have to set sort of the ground rules and the direction and get the right people on the bus and in the right seats. Driving that forward was, I just felt out past that we're more like I'm working for them versus they're working for me.
On this episode of A Call to Leadership, we asked the question, could something that is considered a weakness become a superpower? I've invited someone who has dealt with this very issue, dyslexia, and has found a way to channel that into a thriving, creative business. I can't wait for you to meet Eric Habert, who is a tremendous individual. What a great story that will inspire and encourage. And I have my co-host, Joe Thompson, on this one as my wingman. I can't wait for you to listen in. I'm Dr. Nate Sala, and this is A Call to Leadership. Eric, so good to have you on the show today, and my special guest co-host, Joe.
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome, Eric.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, man. So I had to have you on the show when we met at your studio. And just to give our audience a little context, we came into the studio, Joe and I, and the aura, the culture, and most impactfully, each individual office custom decorated.
Yes, I really want to get into that later.
I have to admit, I had a little office envy. I mean, I'm just being, I'm just confessing my sins, right? So I was like, wow, this is so cool. And not necessarily from the perspective of, I want those offices, but it actually motivated and inspired me. Because then I went to my people in my office and said, guys, I'm going to create a little budget for you. Each of you customize your office. And of course, accountants, look at you like you have three heads like, what? Customize my office? What? I don't know what to do.
They bought a wall calendar.
Well, it was an idea that, like a lot of the great ideas that come with Lifetime Media, was not from me. It was actually from another employee. It's like, hey, why don't we, I probably had a little office envy of his own when he was creating it. And I was like, hey, that's a cool idea. And kind of show off our personalities, and we're a creative business in a field. And it's like, it made sense. And then we all got really into it. It was a lot of fun.
Wow.
But you picked up on that and expanded on it, and you didn't shut it down, which is what happens a little too often. Oh yeah,
no, it was a fun way to, you got one, you got Abraham, he's got a huge Star Wars collection. So he's the Rebel Alliance.
Yeah, I was envious of that.
All the vintage Star Wars toys and, putting those up. And then you really get a sense of a lot of people. Mine is the arena. I grew up playing hockey, and hockey was actually a big part of my life. And so it was, natural I had a lot of memorabilia and things that I put up. And so, yeah, we had fun with it. And there's a few, I don't know if you noticed some of the plaques that were on some of the names of like the conference room and some other things. There's some inside jokes there too that probably other people walking in and be like, well, these guys are nuts. but it's fun.
But that's probably a good thing. It's a little bit of a differentiation strategy, really having conversations around building cultures, because I think this is an important conversation for not only our audience, but for us to kind of flesh out this idea of culture and how it can manifest itself to ultimately create sustaining organizations. And by all rights, your organization is sustaining. I mean, you've made it through, right? A very difficult time.
Yeah. We're, in some ways, sometimes I look back and I'm like, I should have probably arrived where we are now, 10 years ago. But there's challenges you don't foresee and things you got to get through. We didn't foresee a major recession in 2008, right after, not that it's good timing for anyone, but it was especially bad timing for us. We had just invested heavily in a lot of things. And so, the timing of it was not good. And there's other challenges that come up. And I also think for a long time I treated, early years of the company was more like a job than a business. So I think really when I look at it as a company, even though we've been around 22 years, it's really like the last 8 to 10 years that I feel like we've actually been an established company, if that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense.
Yeah, I remember I was like 18 years old. I had an entrepreneurial friend, and he said, if anyone wrote out a contract that listed everything you had to do to own your own business, no one would ever sign it because there's all those things that come up that you just don't foresee. And you were telling us kind of some adjustments you made in 2008 during that recession.
Yeah. So, we had just gotten into a new studio space. We went from 1,100 square foot, small studio area, and then we jumped to about a 5,500 square foot space, and hired about 4 new people. We invested in equipment and so forth, and then bam, all of a sudden we were doing good things then, and we were doing great work and had great relationships with our clients, but they just didn't have any money, or in the marketing field, that got shut down. And so it's funny, we didn't really lose clients. Everyone went idle. And the mistake that we made then, or I made as far as leading it, was I think instead of being aggressive and kind of doubling down and getting after it, I think we kind of curled up in the corner, curled up in the ball in the corner, and just didn't innovate to, okay, how do we get through this?
That's a really good point you make. I was just having this very similar conversation with a client yesterday who was having some issues with whether to curl up in a corner or innovate. I mean, that's a real question that comes up. And my response was innovate, get out of that corner, go for it. What happened when you first started the business? Let's rewind. What motivated you to even start this business?
Well, going back, I guess really even further, is that I was always interested in video. There's actually 2 things I was always really interested in: hockey and video. It was like always part of my life. And on the video side, my dad had like one of those really old school, camcorders that, it's like probably 15 pounds and, sits on your shoulder, and it was VHS tapes. And I would take that thing everywhere. I just thought I had so much fun with it. I would, take it to, and we'd have friend gatherings or make skits with friends. And it was just getting creative with it. It was a lot of fun. And I actually used it so much that I became a pretty good at composition, and also studied things on my own, just kind of, self educating myself. And that's actually, I was more of a camera person at first. How
old were you?
That was probably freshman year in high school time on. And then I have actually, I'm getting them all transferred right now. I have all these tons of VHS tapes of all these memories of, hanging out with friends. And
did you have a mullet?
I did. I wouldn't call it a mullet. It was, it was enough to come out the back of my hockey helmet. Let's just say that.
Nice.
Now, you struggled in school.
Yeah.
You're a smart guy, but you had some struggles that you had to face and overcome. And I think some people will relate to that if you want to talk a little bit about it.
Sure. It's definitely a part of my history, and I'm certainly not alone. There's a lot of people that, especially now, learning disabilities is a pretty well recognized thing. I was diagnosed with dyslexia, and I wasn't actually diagnosed until officially a little bit later in grade school. But it was pretty obvious, looking back, like in first grade, second grade, spelling it still isn't a great strength of mine. But what it does is it can flip your letters, and when you're reading, you're seeing the word that's directly in front of you, not the words that are coming up. And so there's things, of course, in school as you're in tests, anxiety and stuff like that, taking quite a bit longer on tests. And there's more support, I think, now for some of that, where you can take timed or tests that aren't timed and things like that. But it's okay. I think that my dad had a really great work ethic that I learned a lot from. So he had a grit about him, and he played for LSU football. Actually, he's got a whole backstory of his own. I could just do a talk of that for an hour, but I think it really, where I'm getting at is it really strengthened my resolve and having grit, and I'm going to get through this no matter what kind of attitude. So that's, I didn't ever get the best grades, but I got, did decent, and you kind of learn strategies to get through it. And I did eventually graduate a very small school called Linda Vista. And there was only 7 of us actually by the time I graduated in our class. This was in West County area before there was anything out there. And then I went on to, again, kind of cross in and out of hockey. I was very into hockey, and I wound up going to Chaminade and playing there. That's a big reason why I wanted to go there. It's the hockey team. But I had tutors and so forth, and just kind of worked my way through it.
Was your dad supportive through that process of like the dyslexia and just kind of getting through school?
Oh yeah. Everyone totally supportive.
Yeah.
I had in fact, I had a lot of teachers that were supportive. Not all of them, but some of them that were very supportive and kind of understood, what's going on.
Yeah. I wonder to what extent that preparation gave you a foundation for leadership and entrepreneurship, even in your own company. So a lot of the research around entrepreneurial leaders, there's some kind of struggle in youth, and it doesn't necessarily have to be major trauma, but some kind of challenge to overcome. Also, generally there's a parent or some kind of a mentor figure who is inspiring, but also teaches that, what you said, that grit, right? That resilience, and gives you an opportunity to understand how that can manifest later. Plus, just having dyslexia and like having to navigate through this environment of uncertainty certainly it gives you that kind of preparation later, because as you get into a business, it is everything but certain. Yeah.
I think you also get creative of how to, get through certain things. And I also think there's I think maybe even some studies out there that talks about it, but I think there's also other areas of your brain that get activated. So which there could have been more creativity that I was receiving because of certain parts of my learning disabilities. So what I looked at as certain areas were weaknesses, but I was gaining strengths in others.
Mm-hmm.
Another commonality of leadership is, like you said, you have that parent figure or mentor, whoever. My dad, he suffered from emphysema. He smoked his whole life back before anybody would tell you that there was something wrong with it.
When doctors were smoking.
Yeah, doctors were smoking while they're talking to you. So he struggled with that, and he worked until he was 64. He could have, went on disability or retired early or whatever. But, when I think about him, I think about just the guy grinding it out, just to get to the car. And you said your dad had a lot of grit. Mm-hmm. Would you say he was at least your first example of some type of leadership?
Oh, definitely. He was he's very dedicated about his family and his work. He was a radiologist, but he came from a background he grew up in Vicksburg, Mississippi, had an upbringing that didn't have a lot of money, kind of a situation where maybe he wasn't going to be able to even get to college. And for him, football was actually the thing that got him there. So he was able to excel in football and was able to get a scholarship to go to LSU. And he actually went to the Orange Bowl and the Cotton Bowl, has his championship ring, and always
nice.
Thought that was really
pretty
cool. And then he went to med school and on to Vietnam, and had a lot of, just had a young family as well. So he did, nothing was handed to him. He really worked hard for a lot of that. And I just loved that story, that background.
Well, let me ask you this. This is a great question, because when you have a generational legacy and nothing is handed to you, and then you make life a little bit easier for your own kids, you wonder sometimes how that affects the next generation. Because I just had an episode we recorded with a couple of other entrepreneurs who also had some life challenges and are struggling to figure out how to make sure the kids still have character building experiences, but don't have to suffer like you did, right? I mean, there's some kind of a methodology that we're still figuring out. That exchange
of knowledge without handing them everything.
Yeah. You don't want to teach kids to be entitled. You want to have them have a hand up rather than a hand out. How did that affect you?
Yeah. So, well, I can't say that I came from an upbringing that there wasn't money or opportunity, but my dad didn't treat it like that. It was very much you had to very much work for what you wanted to do, and it was more like the mental. It's hard to explain, but there's a mental toughness. That's what is always preached. And again, I kind of bring up hockey a lot because it's really interwoven with who I am, and a lot of experiences in sports in general, create a lot of life experiences for people. So, I started playing hockey when I was 5, and I played all the way through. I still play, and it doesn't look pretty, but So there's a lot of these life lessons and things, and my dad was at every game. He was always involved. And so there was a lot of, learning lessons through that. And so.
No, that engagement and mental toughness, I'm so glad you brought that up, because you can teach kids, even if you've gone through stuff and maybe you're in a position, someone listening today is maybe a success story and they came from nothing and they've got their family and they're wondering, well, if I just buy my kid that $40,000 BMW for the 16th birthday, am I really teaching them to have mental toughness along the journey? I've instituted a shared responsibility with the teens in terms of building their mental. In fact, I had this conversation with one of the kids recently. I'm creating mental toughness in you. And then I got the look like, please, I don't want to have mental toughness, but it's better, right?
I'd rather have the car than the mental toughness.
So I always had
I hope you didn't get the Beamer when.
No, I did not.
Make for my
I had a sister, and then a brother Mark, and then so Renee, Mark, Kristen, and then myself. So I'm the youngest, and it was usually the car got passed through the others, and then it got to me, and it was
250,000 miles.
It was like my dad was almost famous for how long he would hold on to his own cars. I mean, it was literally he had a Trailblazer that would have rusting out on the side, wheel wells, and it would be like the cars were done once the transmission fell out while they were driving it. That's when you got a new vehicle.
That's good. So did your father encourage entrepreneurship or the college / working in corporate America route, or being a doctor or a lawyer or accountant, so professional trades?
It's funny. He really didn't push anything in particular. It was kind of all of us finding our own paths. And part of this might be because I'm the fourth. By the time they got to me, they're like,
all right, you just figured it out. Yeah, we're good.
I have a gap between my oldest sister's 12 years older than I am, and then my brother's 10, and then my other sister is 8 years. And then there's me. So they claim that they just got bored and they decided so they were all living in New Orleans, and then my dad got a job out of St. Louis, and then I was actually the only one born in St. Louis.
That's cool. So letting you find your way, I think that's important,
especially with a creative child. If you're pushing them towards a particular academia, or hey, we pushing you towards some kind of corporate position, it really is going to stifle your creativity, and your creativity is really what built your business.
Yeah, it's funny. I just don't recall them ever. I know that going to college was very important for him. He wanted to, and he always got the diplomas. So that's how it worked. You went to school, and I have my sister got her master's as well, and a PhD in psychology, and so those diplomas even they went on his office wall first, and then we got them back later.
That's hilarious. So I got to have your dad on this show.
Yeah, and unfortunately, he's over the years, he's had his own battle now. So he's got Alzheimer's, which was something that now the family is more kind of dealing with in more recent years. So it's great though that he's here in St. Louis and get to see him all the time though. He's doing pretty good.
Yeah. No, that's good. My son asked me probably a couple years ago, Dad, do I have to go to school as long as you? And he was 12 at the time. And he's like, I had about 24 years of schooling. And I said, no, you don't. And he's like, whew. That kind of pressure. But it's important, I think, to this is an important piece of the conversation as we move into, the future for you, because I think we have to allow our kids to find their own path and not impose a path on them that ultimately won't lead them to be the best possible version of themselves or live and flourish. And so I think sometimes, and I've heard this said from others I've talked to, it's like my dad wanted me to take over the family business and I didn't want to take over the family business, or I didn't want to follow in his footsteps, and I felt so pressured, and it was miserable, and it was a total train wreck. In fact, even my son, same thing. He told me a couple of years ago, I don't know, 12 years old, they have a lot of crazy ideas. So he's like, Dad, I need to take over the family business when you retire. I'm like, why? He said, because I don't want the family name to die. I'm like, that's like the worst idea I've ever heard in my life. No, you do what you do best.
Yeah, no, they were always very supportive. And I think there was I always, it's kind of strange, but I always was really entrepreneurial, even when I was young. So in grade school, I would, take my extra, especially the duplicate Matchbox cars that I had, and I would take them to school and I would, sell them to the other kids or take orders for the next day, which the school called my parents and said that I can't be doing that anymore. And I think it was one of the proudest
They're
moments.
stifling you already.
You know what we call that? That's a hustle. You were a hustler even in grade school.
Yeah, and I and then there's some stories. I don't recall all of this, but apparently I had set up a little shop, at the doorway of my room for my brothers and sisters. There's not very much foot traffic other than your own family, and was trying to sell items or
nice. You were like
drawing pictures, and
that's awesome.
I just I found it fun. I don't know. I don't know where that came from, honestly.
Yeah, you were a young capitalist,
I guess
man
so.
of industry, even as a child. And how did that happen through teenage years into your first business? Walk us through that process of becoming a business owner.
Originally, I, for a while there, I was thinking very much like, being in a business or creating a business and, leading a business. And then I sort of had this also creative shift where I was getting into writing and thought, well, maybe screenwriting would be interesting, or something more in the arts that way. And I actually went I was an English major in college, which is funny. I was a dyslexic English major.
Of course. What else would you be?
Which was great because it did improve a lot of my communication skills and stuff I use all the time and is important. And then when I was in college, I actually was still very much into hockey, but I had some serious knee injuries. So I didn't wind up going and playing ice hockey anywhere. Roller hockey was actually coming around, and I went to Truman State. It was Northeast Missouri State for I think a year, and then changed names while I was there. So I'm giving you a age. For the record, that's not my phone.
Yeah, we'll just edit that out, maybe.
So I was playing, just roller hockey with friends, like at the school, and then my knee started kind of recovering. I went through physical therapy, and I was like, man, I really miss playing. And there is a point to this. I'll get to it, but so I started. Someone else actually started a club. That was a roller hockey club at school. And then I was part of that, and we were like, let's go find teams let's like play. Long story short, I wind up basically starting a hockey company, and I didn't realize it at the time. But what I did was I would call schools and colleges, universities in the region and see if they had a club sports department. If there was a roller hockey club. It was pretty popular at the time. And so there was a lot of clubs that were just starting. And then I would send them a packet of how to hold a tryout. And so they could make a travel team. And then if we collected enough of those, we could create a season out of it and do like these 6 season weekends and come together.
Why did you want that?
I think I just really wanted to play. You
wanted to play. No, that's what I was hoping you would say that. Because I think a lot of just hovering right there. We often try to like overthink entrepreneurship, and I think sometimes the best kind of entrepreneurship is when we want to solve a problem that's important to us, and you just wanted to play, so you're like, I'm going to find a way to play.
Yeah, and there was others that were interested in playing. It was a lot of fun too. Once we would go, we were friends that got to go to St. Louis and Kansas City. We'd kind of help design how this thing would work. And then I ran it. And then once I graduated, I just kept on running it. And then I kind of got a season director who helped me run it. And then eventually I had it for about 11 years. And eventually I sold it to the person that was running it more or less at that point.
And then you was there any other work? Was that all did you have all the eggs in that basket? Were you working part-time anywhere else or doing anything else?
So part of this was while I did the 5-year plan at school. So
nice.
Because I partly because I was busy doing these other things that weren't part of the actual classes or school. I was also doing video stuff. I was still interested in that too. So I was creating music videos and doing things that had nothing to do with any of the classes I was taking, but it was taking time. So I actually encourage my kids now even to do things like that, try to do some stuff outside of just the format of school that can be passion work or whatever you want to call it. And so because of that, that actually, I took some less hours to make sure I still kept some time for that too. And so when I graduated college is actually also when I decided to start why don't I try doing a video company? And so I had that and the hockey thing kind of going simultaneously.
Nice.
Very humble, very, very humble beginnings though on that.
Were you videotaping all the hockey games?
Yeah, actually, that became. I had a lot of hockey contacts, so I started like, hey, how can I merge these together here?
No doubt, yeah, invention, right? Yeah, coming from necessity.
Yeah.
So you graduate college, you've got the hockey business, you start a very humble video business. Is it the same Lifetime Media as it is today?
It was called, it changed. Originally, what I was doing was family biographies. So it was very different. And it was called Lifetime Family Tree Services, I believe. Gosh, it's been a while. But we were converting people's pictures and then trying to take it to the next step of possibly interviewing and creating these little biographies for families.
Because back then, so we're talking, what year was this?
So this was in 98.
98. So where was our video technology in 98? For those who may be listening who were not born yet.
Yeah. So we would have been, oh, see, you're testing my memory here. What were we doing? We probably would have been like high 8 tapes. We were still, VHS was actually still around, but it was, a lot of high 8 tapes. And then there was people that still had a ton of old film, 8mm reels, or they'd have their VHS tapes that needed to be transferred. And they would have a ton of, everyone printed their pictures then, of course. So like there was not a lot of digital. It was all like the shoebox full of stuff. And then I was there to help them organize and create a family history. What I didn't realize at the time is that, and why that path didn't stick for a long time is, people will pay several $1,000s for a coffee table, but they won't do it to preserve their family memories sometimes, and because they're just not in that moment. It's too overwhelming. They look. I think it was like looking in the closet of all these photo albums and box of tape, and to try to even wrap their head around it and pull time together to do it.
That's, what's so funny about that is whenever you ask someone, hey, if your house was on fire,
I know,
what's the one thing you would save? They never save the coffee table.
Right.
They always say, oh, my pictures, my videos.
I'm having like a moment because I've got this huge tub in the basement full of all my pictures. And then I'm like, when I get home tonight, I'm going to have to put it in the truck and take it somewhere so I can get them digitized.
Yeah, my mom transferred my dad had like a 35mm, like little camera. We just had all that transferred to disc, because that was a few years ago.
That was the tech back then.
And then eventually, it was a big deal to get it once you got to DVD. You could put it on, DVD. And I actually did my own family did it. My sister Kristen and I went through 12,000 photos. They used to call my grandmother Flash because she took so many pictures. So there's an unbelievable amount. Now the saving grace was that she at least organized them in photo albums. So we went through all of those, transferred media. I've now sitting on and this was actually not been updated in quite some time, but I have a 4 DVD set, family history biography of what we interviewed my parents, and it goes by year, starting from the time when they were born to when my kids were born and my family. It's very, very, it's extremely comprehensive, and I feel terribly for all the brother-in-laws and sister-in-laws that had to sit through and watch the thing. No,
that's brilliant. What a way to preserve the memories. I had never heard that before. What a wonderful opportunity for the legacy and of course making it required viewing for every new member of the family at a certain age.
I think I even put a disclaimer at the beginning once it was done. It took an unbelievable amount of time. If we had actually charged someone, to do something like this, they would have probably had to take out a second mortgage or something. But there was a lot of time. It was a lot of fun. But we put a disclaimer in the beginning that all events and dates and everything are now, this is what it was. This is now accurate. So I don't want to hear about, hey, this happened after that, that, or all spellings of everything are now as is.
That's a big job. Do you remember where you were the first time you watched a VHS tape?
Can't say
you did.
You know what? Actually, I kind of do, but it wasn't VHS. It was Betamax. It was the beta tapes.
The beta, right? Because that
was the war between VHS and beta.
I remember that.
And
now beta had the better quality.
Yes,
but VHS was cheaper to produce. So
yes, and we had an old. It was new at the time. Had a beta deck, and it was still around up to a few years ago. I still had that. I grabbed it or whatever, and it's like, I mean, it's like 100 pounds. I mean, it's unbelievable.
There's an entire generation, if they hear this, are just scratching their heads.
Yeah, and I think we had like Teen Wolf on beta or something.
Oh, yeah. We went to my uncle's house because he was the first one to have a VCR, and it was we played Michael Jackson's Thriller and watched. Of course, you loaded it from the top and you pressed the whole thing down, and it was amazing.
Yeah, it was such a big deal.
Yeah,
back then.
Yeah, can you imagine that carrying around?
Even going to like a cinema or something was like a huge thing to do.
Yeah,
and now you just click on the TV and you watch whatever you want.
Yeah, or your phone.
Yeah, well, I like it much in the business that we're in right now. It's a lot easier to work with. It's a lot more fun than having to deal with when I first started editing. Because I was interested. I was the one that was filming and editing and doing all that early on, and it
was just a staff of one. Were you the?
Yeah. So when I started, I lived in South City. A lot of the houses have the sort of the attached sunrooms, so that was my office. And as I grew out of the family biography thing, because it just wasn't like excelling enough, I was like, well, let's start filming things. And that's where the hockey context kind of came back into play. In fact, I'm pretty sure if there was such a thing as a Guinness Book of World Records for the most roller hockey games ever filmed, I'm pretty sure we hold the record. It's 14,000.
Well, that's why we had you come on the show, actually. That's the real reason.
So yeah, we used to cover these major roller hockey events. So there's one called Narch and State Wars and all these different ones. Well, some of these are big enough that they would go on for 2 or 3 weeks and have 30 divisions and tons of people. And we would have a crew of 10 there for 2 to 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. And then turn around and create these videos, or people could we got to the point where they could actually come to the booth after their last game about an hour after and actually pick up a DVD set of each one of all the games they played in that tournament and take it home with a personalized case. So it got pretty nice, but that also, we outgrew that as well.
So getting started, you were leveraging your interest in your network in hockey to begin to fund and generate business. Did you have a family yet?
Yeah, I started early with my family, and Joe and I actually were talking about this earlier, that it probably motivated me because I was 23 when I had my first, so just out of college. So I had the mortgage, the car payments, the whole thing going. You
couldn't just live on ramen noodles, you in a 1-bedroom place by yourself while you built this business.
Yeah, so it was I have to give so much credit to my wife Mary, because for a long time her working and gave us the opportunity to even pursue these things. Because if it was just me, there was other revenue streams while we got this thing up and going.
Was she supportive through the whole thing? Were there ever times where like, honey, you need to go get a job?
Well, she's completely supportive, and I'm sure there was times she was thinking that. She was just nice enough never to completely, and there's been other transitions and moments like in 2008 when that recession hit, where at the time she was actually working at the company, and then we had all of our eggs in one basket. So she wound up going back to her R&D background in science, and so
it hits pretty hard, the 08 recession.
Yeah, and so but she was always very supportive, and kept, I think she just saw the drive of, let's just get through this. Let's keep going.
So let's dispel a myth about entrepreneurship, because I get in conversations with this quite often. people think that, if I'm going to have this business that I want, there are these huge moves that I have to make throughout my life. But it really doesn't happen that way. It's a bunch of little steps, some stumbles, recoveries. It's a bunch of little things that really help you to create your business in the long run. And I've heard you say support. You had a supportive family, you had a supportive wife. So if you have an entrepreneur in your family, support is what they need, and they're going to stumble. There's going to be things that come, their way that they're not going to be able to foresee, and you don't have to make these big giant leaps in order to have your own business someday. It can be small, little things that lead up to it.
Yeah. And one thing I think I would want to point out is, and I was probably, my thinking or realizing this early was influenced because I read a lot. So if you've got a passion for this stuff, read the business book. You can self-teach yourself quite a bit. And especially now, you can jump on YouTube and watch videos and endless resources. But one thing that really got me early is that are considered kind of classics now is like E-Myth. So Michael Gerber's book, really got me thinking about if I'm working on the business or am I working in it. Also got me thinking about things like, and it's okay if you want to do this, but are you building a career or are you building a business? There's not a right or wrong to that. It's just, I think I had a early understanding of that, and I really wanted to build a business. And the difference is if you're building a career, which you can have your own company, have the LLC, have the paperwork, and be a company and run it yourself, or maybe it's a couple people, and you could still be building a job, and that's okay. Maybe in our world, maybe you're a DP, which is a director of photography, and that's what you do, and you always want to be out there in the field and do your passion. That's what you do. And then you have maybe a business partner that's an editor, and that's your career that you've built under the umbrella of a business. The difference of coming out of that is I wanted to build a company that was the camera person, I was the editor, but then I replaced myself as I could. So the first replacement I was able to do was bringing in an editor. That was huge because editing takes up so much time and it's hard to focus on almost anything else. So the goal was am I building something that I can step away from and it is still running? If I take a week vacation, does everything shut down and stop? Or am I taking a week vacation and we're still bringing in sales? Are we still growing as a company? Are things continuing on as they should be without me?
So glad you brought that up, because we need to distinguish, we begin with the end in mind. Where do we want to be with this business? And I'm in full agreement that there's no right or wrong answer. If you want to be a great technician, a world-class neurosurgeon, well, then that's going to be how you define your day. If you want to fire yourself from technical work so that you can scale the business and move out of a technician's position, move more into management and leadership in different areas, then you set the business up for that. And again, like you said, there's no right or wrong answer.
Yeah. And so that was, now it didn't mean I was able to do that right away. That's the difference. I just understood it early. And so I could try to go towards that goal. But it took a lot of years. It took a long time to be able to get that or replace it. And then the reset button was when we got to the 2008, that was the first time that we had I had that kind of disruptive thing happen that where it was like, okay, got to make a decision. And unfortunately we had employees, so we had to lay off people. we had to regroup and really kind of focus back. The silver lining in it all is what we went back to, what are we best at? At that time, we were trying to do websites and print and all kinds of marketing, and video was just a component of that. And I was able to step back and say, really, our core is video production. That's what we excel at. That's who we are. And so when we came out of that, we just rebuilt it. And I was just determined to come out. We doubled down on our core values and who we were, our identity, and rebuilt.
So that caused you to kind of maybe recoil a little bit, reevaluate some things. And now we jump into 2020, where who sees this pandemic coming? No one. And we had spoken earlier about some innovation and things that you had to do to get through that horrible year for everyone. I mean,
yeah. The biggest difference this time around was that I think in 2008 it was more fear and I don't deserve this kind of thing. And this time it was anger. I was angry. I was a little bit of a fist in the air, like, no, I'm not putting up with this. It's hard to explain. Best I can say, it was just a different kind of focus. It wasn't we're not going to lay down in this.
Fire was lit.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah. It was like, no, let's come up with things. And also the difference was that we really had the right team in place and good, I say core values again, because I think it's important to know your identity and what your culture is. And our culture at this point I knew I had a team in place that we could fight through this. And so we innovated this time. And it was coming up with, the first thing was actually doing virtual commencements for schools, because it was May and it was around that time. And there was a lot of universities and school districts that were struggling with how are we going to put on these, recognize people that are graduating. And so we did virtual events. We had a school as far away as New Jersey. We worked with, we picked up new clients in Chicago. And some of these people are clients that we still have today because we were a solution. We just became a solution for what was going on.
This is important. How did you begin to innovate? What were the processes that you had? Was it a staff meeting? Was it you individually, or was it a combination of things?
Well, the one thing, and it turned off. So in March of 2020, which, by the way, simultaneously, we were eminent domained out of our Brentwood location, our studio space that we had been in for 13 years. And so we moved into our new studio space, April Fool's Day, April 1st of 2020. The pandemic was everything was shutting down. We didn't know if our movers were going to show up. So we got, at least things moved over. And then, the luxury of something you don't always have is time. And so when things all of a sudden are shut down and there's, everything's on pause is basically what it was. Well, that sure opened up a lot of time for our team. So we did Zoom calls and we were like, let's brainstorm this together. We just all leverage was put on, I was honest. I don't know. Not that I wasn't honest during the last recession. It was just that I was trying to take care of it all myself. This time around, I was more like the team was involved, and I said, here's what we know, and listed all the things that we know that's going on, where we are as a company, and the steps we're going to take to keep this team together and move forward. And that may have meant reducing everyone by 25% on a salary. I was just honest with what was ahead of us.
Yeah. No, that's, and if you're listening and you're a business owner or you're struggling in leadership, the natural inclination is, I got to figure this out. But that doesn't take advantage of all the resources of people around you. who would be willing to help you along the way, whether it's an employee, a group of employees, whether it's, a post on social media. It does. This, just reach out and say, look, I'm in a bind here. This is a situation. I kind of tend to look at it. I don't know if anyone's a Trekkie or not, but the difference between a Jean-Luc Picard and a Captain Kirk, where Kirk would go in blazing, fists, like punching and all that. And then Picard would go in, and I always remember him at his big table with all his people and saying, here's what we've got. Let's work together and make this happen. And I think this, of course, there's always a place for a Kirk, but, in nostalgia. But today's day and age, we need each other. We need each other to make sure that we can collectively find solutions for big problems we have. And I hear this all the time from business owners like, oh, I got to figure this out. Well, have you talked to people yet? Well, no, I don't want to talk to them yet because, I don't want them being discouraged, or I don't want them thinking I'm not a good leader. I'm like, and of course, we're through usually a phone. I want to smack them through the phone. I'm not a violent person by any means. I'm like, come on, you've got all.
You're saying you're a Kirk?
But your approach was so different round two. Of course, 12 years go by in the trenches and all of that. But it's important to make that distinction.
Yeah. And I always thought of myself as, for a while, honestly, I almost felt strange talking about myself as a leader, or I just looked at it as a partnership. I can now look at it and say, okay, I am the leader of this company, because I do think that's important. I think you have to set sort of the ground rules and the direction and get the right people on the bus and in the right seats, as Jim Collins would say. Good to Great was another very influential book for me. Driving that forward was, I just felt past that we're more like I'm working for them versus they're working for me.
This is a fundamental variance between traditional authoritarian leadership models and what we would call a serving leadership model, where traditional models are very pyramidal, right? The leader's at the top, everybody's subservient, front line, expendable, traditional model. The serving leader is more like a tree, and the serving leader's at the bottom, nourishing the roots so that, you got a tree on your shirt. All right.
That's part of our logo, the tree in our Lifetime Media. That's part of our signature branding, is is something that we've had since day one, actually. So it is about the entrepreneurial spirit and innovation. So the branches are meant to innovate and grow, but we prune the right branches and keep the others to allow them to reach the sky. And so that's kind of like the whole tree theme is something we've always had.
That was not rehearsed.
So we mentioned a few times now the word culture, which is thrown around wildly in companies. And from my personal experience, where I've heard culture a lot of times, and I've worked in big corporate companies, you realize as an employee that the CEO has no idea what culture really means, as far as how it's received by the employees. So I believe there are two subcultures under culture. There's your sales and service culture, the way you approach your customer. And then there's your employee culture, the way your employees approach their job. Often I don't think there's that distinction enough. I had a CEO one time who thought of like the sales department as like a bad thing, that these guys are out there and, everyone's a used car salesman, because they don't understand, real salesmanship and real customer service. Did you make that distinction? Like, we know you made the distinction with your employees because they seem, everyone there seemed really happy to be there, and they all made their own personal mark on their offices, like we said. Did you separate like that kind of culture and then create another sales culture where, hey, this is the way we now approach our customers? Or did it just kind of happen organically for you?
Well, I think a lot of it goes back to just the kind of people we are, is wanting to help people or be solutions for people. I know this is, and it sounds so cliche, because people also throw around core values a lot. Like it's up on the wall and it's like, but it doesn't really resonate or mean anything. My favorite thing is when we get testimonials from customers, clients, and I see basically descriptions in the testimony. They don't realize they're doing it, but they're saying things that are actually in our core values. When you hire and when you have the right people and the right team that are all in it like that, it's all very natural. Both on the internal side with employees, but also on the external side when we're working directly with clients. We're very much trying to partner with them and trying to help them make the right decisions. And it's not like it never feels like we're selling. It's more like, how can we help you get to your goals?
Yeah. We go from adversary to ally, really, when you go from selling to serving or solving. And our audience would have heard me talk about this in the past. I agree. I think that core values do get thrown around. I think when they're just words on a wall, they don't really have the meaning or the intent that will ultimately lead to creating a family, if you will, that every touch point has the same high level of experience quality. Because culture, ultimately, when it's cohesive, will create that experience that you desire. But I think there's an important part to this, that it's great cultures are top down. The individual leader or the group of leaders, they believe it and they live it. And when they bring people in that share it, because culture, your core values, if you will, are boundaries. They create borders. And basically, if you don't agree with our values, then maybe you're not a best fit in our organization. And I'm sure at some point you've had to make that decision for folks.
Yeah. And, even if you're working with contractors outside of your employees, it's the same thing. They need to fit in. And I think that's it's really important to have everyone on the same page. So then when you're now talking about sort of having everyone's on the same page with the vision of the company, on the same page of the type of things that we value, then you start to get this sense that you can't be stopped, because it's much more organic. And there's trust too that builds up. I think that's important too. Everyone's got to be able to trust one another and how we're doing things, and that when we say also that we're going to, maybe there's areas we need improvement, that there's the ability to speak up and say where we need that improvement. I've never understood leadership that wants just yes people or doesn't want to hear where they need that improvement. And that goes from, I'm hoping, and I believe we do have that culture of where it's okay to voice your opinion on here's things that we need to improve and let's get on. And it could be something that I'm tied to. And it's because we look at it more as the processes that need fixing.
Right. And you don't live in a fear-based environment. If you live in a fear-based environment, then people will not share their opinion because ultimately it could cost them something that's important, their job or projects or whatnot, ostracization in the internal culture, right? All these issues. But if you live in a progressive environment that says, I give you permission to give quality feedback so that we can improve the process so that ultimately we all move toward the vision. And that's why one of the reasons why it's so essential to actually be able to speak it, believe in it, and continue to move toward it.
We have done something to collect these. We call it misalignment lists, and some of this, like if people are listening, will pick up some of these sort of keywords that's coming from different books and whatnot. I mean, that's how you learn, is you kind of take a little bit of lots of different people's experiences. So we had started with and I also have a business coach. I think that is important too, and a part of and that was something I also picked up after, I think it was around 2010 that I started that. But so I have an advisory board that are other business owners that we meet with and talk about what's going on in the business and bounce things off of. And then we have a moderator or coach that's kind of overseeing that. And then we have a one-on-one with the coach. So, it's good to have other, in some ways that also makes me feel also accountable for some others too, which is not a bad thing.
Well, you're a lifelong learner. And in my research, years of academia, the most effective leaders never take their foot off the gas in learning, in growing. I mean, and oftentimes it starts in youth, but it doesn't have to if that's not where you're starting right now. But to get into the game of whether it's books or videos and people, like the business coach, the advisory board, the accountability, all of that feeds into innovation. And here's the thing about innovation. We say that word as if it's like a tech word, right? But really, when we define innovation, it really just means ideas. And if we don't have ideas, that's not necessarily generated just from us, but from those around us as well, we're not going to be leading. And the reason is because leadership involves change. If there's no change necessary, there's no reason to lead anyone anywhere, right? And so with new ideas here is a new idea about how to do this better and how to provide a better opportunity, a better service, how to better ultimately solve problems. And we can't do that in a box, in a vacuum. We have to do it through discovery.
Yeah, plus it's fun. I enjoy it. I think it's fun. Anyone who's passionate about whatever they do, it's usually hard to turn it off. I mean, if anything, that was something I had to try to learn and probably still struggle at is turning it off.
Yeah. Wow.
Making sure you're dedicating time to other important things as well. But when it's fun, you enjoy it.
Yeah, indeed. So if you're going to give some tips to some other entrepreneurs maybe struggling through this pandemic, still struggling, based on your experience, what would you say?
I would first, there's so many different paths that people are on as entrepreneurs, so it's hard to give like one that kind of covers it all. But I would say just use the time if you're able to reevaluate what your goals are. And what's important to you. Start there and look at, and if you're an entrepreneur that already has a team or people that you think is a great fit, and you're happy with that, then maybe take an inward look of what are the attributes that make you great, and then try to build your culture and things around that. If you're down with time, kind of like we were at first, use all those resources to do marketing, to get things done. To don't go sit in the corner. Just don't do that. You have to. It's tough, but you have to kind of get back up. And everyone's heard it. It's not about falling down. It's how you get back up. That's the first thing.
I think that's from the Rocky book, right?
Yeah, all 6 of them.
And I think I had don't cut yourself short on what you're capable of. I don't know if I had a belief that certain things were available or it was possible for me. And one of those was going out and finding so I would always complain I don't have because a lot of companies struggle with cash flow, and we're fortunate not to have that issue right now. And but that's something that a lot of people are struggling with, and been there, and so I've been on both sides. I've been on the side where you just don't have enough business coming in, And I've been on the side where there's so much, it's stressful to make sure you're delivering the right way. And so being on both sides of it, I have a good perspective, but for a long time, I believe that, like, how do you go get the money? Who's going to give me, like, who's going to really cut a check and give us money to go follow this? And that's something that I can help credit, like the business coaching and being a part of that advisory board is asking those kinds of questions. And I was able to I got connected with someone, and within 3 months, they had invested in our company. I had put a plan, and then I was able to put a plan in place that I was already there, knew what we wanted to do. We just didn't have the funding and really the ability to do it. So I would say if there's probably one thing is maybe get a coach or get, part of an advisory board or reach out would be a good place to start.
That's solid. Eric, I'm going to hit you with one more. One day, like all of us, we'll be on that great summit, the very end of the story, right? We're looking back. And as you're looking back, what would you like to have been remembered by? What would you like people to say Eric was?
Well, that's pretty heavy.
It's heavy.
I hope people would look back and say that I was fair and it was a good person. That would mean, that would almost mean more that I helped make a difference, or that I did the right things and was fair. And, I think that would mean a lot.
Well, you're on your way, my friend. So good to have you, Eric. Joe, thanks for co-hosting, brother.
Oh, no problem. Anytime.
Well, thank you.
How can people get a hold of you?
Oh, yeah.
Well, sure. Well, Google's always a great way to start. If you do Lifetime Media, we'll come up. We've got a lot of testimonials off. I think we're up to maybe like 50 testimonial 5-star testimonials on Google, which is great. So you can also see how other people's experiences were. Or if you wanted to actually call, people still pick up the phone every now and then. Although usually
I'm a caller. I like to call.
If you like to call, then we're at 314-481-4754. But, probably 99% of the people are going to Google Lifetime Media, or if our URL is lifetime-media.com.
Awesome. Thanks for being here, my friend.
And I will say, we are in the middle of rebuilding our entire website. So the team would kill me if I didn't say that, because we're, when you're busy working on everyone else's stuff, you sometimes don't work on your own. And people still like our site, but it's not to our internal expectations. So we'll have a new website out soon too.
Awesome. Looking forward to hopping on. Thanks again.
Thank
Joe,
you.
Thanks for being here, my brother.
Thank you, sir. Thanks, Eric.
Well, my friend, thank you for joining me on this episode of A Call to Leadership. If you've been listening, you've probably heard me talk about our accounting and advisory business. And this show was actually born out of that business, those relationships. I found that entrepreneurs and professionals were missing. If you're in that place, do not despair. I'll leave how you can find us in the show notes.